Welcome back to the Education Game. We are so excited to bring on Tory Gattis, and Tory, I'll just let the viewers know we just had a 20-minute conversation. I forgot to press record. It was a fantastic conversation. We're now going to recreate it, Tory. Okay?
We're going to do our best to recreate it.
Go.
None of you get to see the amazing magic that just happened in the last 20 minutes. It would have
No.
changed your lives, but sorry.
We're going to
It's gone.
recreate it. It's just like baking a cake. We just have to do this. We got the same ingredients. All right.
Same recipe. Let's do it.
So we'll start. Tory. Tory's an edupreneur and has done a bunch of stuff in education, always kind of pushing the envelope of what's possible, trying to transform education, trying to create environments that are for learners rather than environments that are for adults on the school side. And so, Tory, do me a favor. Give me give me a bit about the two projects that you're working. I know you're working on more than two, but the two that are kind of most front and center: the Be Someone app, and then WhenSchoolsNotWorking.com. And give us a quick rundown of those two, real quick, please.
I would say my major projects are working with Nobel explorers. Andrew Sachs, I believe he was on your show recently.
Yes.
And then, and I listened to that fantastic show. And the Be Someone app, which is, and then the When School's Not Working is a webcast. We have 7 o'clock Central on Mondays. You can find it at whenschoolsnotworking.com and sign up there, and you'll get reminders by email with the link and everything. But it's basically, there's four of us on a panel. You can ask us questions when school's not working for your family, any question you like. We find that there's just a lot of parents that are frustrated but have no idea where to turn or where to look, and we're just happy to kind of try to point them in good directions.
Yeah.
So that's the webcast. The Be Someone app. You want me to go in depth on that now, or would you like?
Well, let's just give us a sense about what is it, why you started it, and then we'll talk about kind of the demand side of it as well.
Yeah. So it's an Instagram of project-based learning. It's an app aimed at teens where they can upvote cool-looking projects that they are interested in, that develop really good skills, and then try to convince their friends to vote it, and then eventually try to convince their teachers to maybe switch out some of the less engaging parts of their curriculum for these really fun, engaging, skill-building projects. And it has a skills tracking framework on top of it based on Gardner's multiple intelligences. So I'll list them real quick. We call it the mindful self, the servant leader, the critical thinker and problem solver, the compelling communicator, and the creative maker. Those each map to one of Gardner's multiple intelligences and skill building for each of those. So the students can do different projects, track their skills, and try to make their education experience a lot more exciting. The background came out of I have a long background in alternative education, micro schools, and so forth, and I was trying to bring over the best pieces of that to the 95% of students that are really still stuck in traditional education systems, and projects really are the if you had to pick one element, that's it. These really good collaborative projects,
Nice,
high quality projects.
Yeah, and we also talked in the previous 20 minutes about how micro schools are any time that a group of people, like again a group of folks operating outside of the school system, right, are
Yes.
collaborating. And so tell me how the Be Someone app fits into that type of environment again. Like what? Maybe help me understand how you're trying to drive demand for a different type of educational model.
Right. So the quick background on micro schools is that the education world has known for decades that project-based learning is sort of a superior way for students to really be engaged and learn these sort of real-world skills around collaborative problem solving. But the knock against project-based learning is that it's not so great for things like core skills around math, grammar, vocabulary, spelling, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so schools have stuck with the traditional lecture-based approach and, drill and kill homework type approaches. But in the last few years, these amazing e-learning programs have come along. Khan Academy is probably the most popular one, but there are lots of them out there now. And people have discovered that you can put students on these for a couple hours a day. They get their core math, spelling, grammar, some of these sorts of skills. But then they can spend the rest of the day on really engaging, fun projects. And they get a hybrid best of both worlds. And when you run a school that way, you suddenly realize, well, wait a second. Now that the e-learning programs meet each child where they are in their particular development, I no longer need to keep the third graders together and the fourth graders together and the fifth graders together. They can all be in one big group because the e-learning will meet them where they are. And then as long as they're within about a 4 to 5 year age range, they can collaboratively work on projects together. And so now you can have a school with 8 kids, 10 kids around a 4 or 5 year age range, and grow it as high as some of the micro schools get as high as 100 kids, typically say 3 cohorts of 30 or something like that. Wow. That's sort of the Acton model. Different schools do it different ways, but the limit of what you would put in a studio is the same as a classroom. It's about 25 or 30. It's how many you can productively engage in a single Socratic dialogue. But it's really opened up this private school, micro school approach. They're sprouting out all over the country, all over the world, and they can be much more affordable because people can do them out of their home or out of a church or a community center. It really just takes one adult, 1 or 2 adults, and a few dozen kids, and you really got a school going.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting development.
Scott,
so Tory, when do we get public money involved in these endeavors? So I love the micro school model. I actually think that the micro school model might be the next iteration after the 30-year love affair that we had with charter schools. But what I know is, so on 2 levels. One, unless you have public money infused in some of these, there are going to be a lot of at-risk families that are not going to be able to access it. And number 2, for families like myself, I think all of us on this podcast, we're still paying into the public system. And so there's got to be some discomfort there that, you can send your kid to a micro school, but you still have to pay your school taxes. Oh, and by the way, there's also this tuition assigned with the micro school. What's your thinking about public funding coming into the micro school space?
I'm a huge fan of it. I hope it starts to become more and more politically realistic. I would say Florida and Arizona seem to be on the leading edge with this. There's a set of micro schools out there called Prinda in Arizona that have been very successful. They're essentially charter micro schools. So they are public funded and they are free to the families. They have found a nice little niche in the Arizona educational legal system where they can get public funding for the students. And then Florida has recently dramatically increased their ability for low-income students, disadvantaged students, to get essentially vouchers. And so there's some developments with micro schools going on there. My hope is that more and more states will go this direction, especially if they see success in the states that are doing it. That's really the ultimate thing that's going to push this, is when a few states do it, they start getting great results. They're raving families, happy families, thriving kids, and other states won't be able to ignore it anymore. They'll have to say, they'll have their citizens asking for the same. Hey, wait, especially when they move, right? I'm in Florida. I love it. I'm moving to Texas or to wherever else. And why can't I do this anymore? So I'm hoping it's the beginning of a movement that will continue to grow.
Well, and anytime we start talking about policies, I start to go, wow. I start to disengage from that conversation because it seems like there's just so many adult institutional partners that have something to lose from changing that I just have little confidence that's going to change. But what I do think is going to change are things like this. I talked about this in the intro. This is it's a learning pod that was set up not far from my house. It's called, what is it called? Black Girl Magic School, which I think is a fantastic name.
That's awesome.
And I reached out to the person that set this up, and I invited her. I haven't connected with her yet, but I invited her to maybe sit down on a conversation like this. I'd be willing to bet, because I've talked to thousands of families, is saying we're going to do this model during COVID, but then when school gets back to normal, we're going to go back to the system that they came from. But what you're describing, Tory, is that they can maintain this model, which again they're raving about. They're loving it. The kids are blossoming in ways that they weren't before. They can continue it because of what you're talking about. These micro schools are now possible for a group of 5 or 6 families to actually make it work without breaking the bank, right?
Absolutely, especially if the parents are willing to chip in and do some of the guiding, as opposed to hiring professional instructors, which is where most of your expense is going to be. Can you find a church that has a room empty Monday through Friday, or somebody's house, depending on how small you are? It's funny. I think it's interesting what you're making me think of, Matt, here was in this pandemic. I think a lot of people like went to Zoom calls and they're like, well, this is all temporary. You know, as soon as we can get back in the office, we will. And then month 1 goes by, month 3 goes by, month 5 goes by. And now I have to say, if a lot of people were told be back in the office tomorrow, they'd be like, well, wait a minute, this is working pretty well. I'm pretty comfortable with this.
Right.
I think this is going to happen with learning pods as well. We're going to get a lot of people that are like, the parents that are convincing themselves this is temporary. I'll be able to jump back into school as soon as it's safe. And then their kids are going to love it and thrive. They'll either decide to stick with it after schools are reopening, or they'll put their kids back in school. Their kids will become miserable. And then they'll be like, well, wait a second. We know they were happy here. They're really unhappy here. Maybe we should go back to this pod thing. Maybe we should figure this out long term. I'm really hoping it opens a lot of families to alternative education for the long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know someone in Houston, in fact, a elementary principal that was approached by a set of 10 families, offered her $100,000 to be that Learning Pods learning coach. So, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think Learning Pods are going to disappear once schools open their doors fully for kids to come back.
But we've got to, so that's part of what Scott and I are really interested in, is how do we support families so that they can do what they believe is right for their kids, right? So on Saturday, we had this kickoff for something we calling the promise and the plan. And we talked about how parents, there's a continuum between the traditional school where everything is decided by adults, everything is structured and standardized, and on the other extreme is kind of an independent learner. And we asked the parents, where's your child currently and where do you want them to be? And every single parent we've asked this of, Scott, we've asked this of 50, 100 people at this point, every single one say, I want to move further towards that self-directed learning environment. And the pods are a way to do that. How can we, do you have any ideas, Scott or Tory, about how do we help more and more families, particularly families that financially are a little bit more on the margin, consider pods like this, using some of the structures you're describing?
I think the number one thing you guys can do is help. I think too many parents are intimidated by, like, they see this giant school system, fancy buildings, professionally, these educated teachers, certified. And they're like, there's just no way I can duplicate this for my own children. They're unhappy, they're frustrated, but it's just too intimidating, this pod idea. But if you really dig into it and you spend a little time with it, it's not that, I'm not going to say it's not that hard. It is, there's a learning curve, no doubt. But there are support resources out there. The internet is amazing. Yeah. I think a lot of families, I would say, once you start to talk to them, the ones that have gone down this path, they'll say they were essentially forced down it. They get down the road and they're like, wait, why didn't I do this earlier? This is actually pretty manageable. This is not impossible. I don't need a master's degree to do this. I can pull the right pieces together. I know my own kids. I can find resources on the internet. I can find other families that want to do the same thing. It's all pretty manageable if you take it step by step, and not as overwhelming or intimidating or scary as you think it is just looking at it before you've done it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. And that's, you don't know some of my history, but that was very similar to my history. We got pushed out of the public setting. We found something called a hybrid school, which was kind of a blend of public and private. And when it came time to go back into the public school, we were like, you know what, let's try this for another year. And 10 years later, we're still in this model, and our kids are just crushing it. And then two of the three went back to public, and they were bored silly. One is the valedictorian and was bored for pretty much 4 years. One had straight A's in a high-performing school, HSPVA, and said that the download speed is just too slow here. I'm enjoying it, but do I really have to spend 10 hours, a day learning? And she said, I want to learn other stuff. I want to go deeper. I want to learn faster. And so she ended up quitting and starting her own educational structure. So I am hopeful that families will start to realize the barriers are a lot lower than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I just wrote a blog about this that somehow sometime parents started to sell themselves short of what they can teach their kids. So, in the article, I reminded parents, you were the ones that taught your kids how to walk, how to talk, how to potty train. You know, for God's sakes, if you can teach that to your kids, reading, problem
Yeah.
solving, especially like you said, Tory, with all of the resources
Oh,
out
so much.
there, but there are so many families that have just punted all of this to these places called school, and I think that most of them didn't know how bad some of these places were until they started to see it over the computer screen starting in March of 2020.
Right.
And
Now they see how the sausage is made, which is never a pretty sight,
exactly,
right? Before it was
exactly,
like your kid's coming home and they're whining and you're like, ah, kids always whine about school. I'm sure it's fine.
right.
But now you see it day to day, hour to hour, and you're like, holy crap, that is miserable. Why am I leaving my kids in this environment? So absolutely. If there is a silver lining to this pandemic, I'm really hoping this is it. And it's that parents are really opening their eyes to what's going on in current schools and what their alternatives are.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get to an article that you sent to us, Tory. One other place, though, that I've seen that parents are really, in fact, I talked to a parent yesterday about it, really nervous about is getting off of the conveyor belt that leads to college and career, right? So if I do something different, will universities now ding my child because they didn't do the 4-year high school and the 4 years of or 2 years of a foreign language and right? And our experience, I don't know if you've interacted with admissions officers, is that if the child's doing things that are interesting and creative, and they've got to have, of course, some basics of reading, writing, etc., math. Universities are actually more interested in those kids because the game plan that everyone else plays, that's all A's, all A's, all A's. Those kids are dime a dozen now, right?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. It's gotten to where I complete agreement. I think I hear some of these colleges now are like everybody's got a perfect SAT score, everybody's got a 4.0. Well, now what do we do? Like they're trying, and it's if you play that game, you're up against some really stiff competition. But as soon as you break out, they have a process for the homeschooling track, the alternative schooling track, and actually your kid will get a much more interesting evaluation going down that track. I don't have a class rank, I don't have a GPA, but here's some test scores that show you that like I'm still, I can read and do basic math pretty well. And here's some awesome projects that I've done.
Bingo.
And and that kind of thing will get their attention for sure because and actually I would say it would differentiate them in a very positive way. Okay. So and I wish more parents understood that.
Yeah, well, we interviewed a former admissions officer at Pomona who said the very same thing. We're trying to get to some more admissions officers to let more parents know you're actually potentially risking more keeping them in a model that beats creativity out of them and causes them to compete with the hundreds of millions of kids in Asia, in South Asia. That this is the only pathway. Grades is the only pathway for those kids to do anything, and so they're 100% in to just grades and SAT scores, right? So, all right. So let's change gears a little bit. So you sent us an article, and it's called "Is This the End of College as We Know It?"
Wall Street Journal.
Yep, Wall Street Journal article. It was November 14th, so just a couple days ago. So I don't know if you knew that I was on the board of a couple of universities.
No.
Yeah, yeah. A public in Missouri and a private here in town, in Houston. And so I'm going to read something from this article. So there's a PhD or a clinical psychologist, PhD clinical psychologist, who's 33 years old, lives in Tampa, earns $94,000 a year as a psychologist, and says her education wasn't worth the cost. She carries $300,000 in student debt. Another one. Yeah, another quote. I just don't see the value in a lot of what I studied, she says. Unless they have a really specific degree in mind, we'd both prefer they take a more pragmatic, less expensive route, talking about their kids. So, what's our take on this? I mean, is this for real? What are your thoughts on this article?
My favorite excerpt from it, it's basically that if you define a success of education as how many kids are getting through college and graduating and getting a job that requires a real college degree, it has an 80% failure rate, which is staggering, right? 80% of kids are being killed. The ballpark numbers I tell people is only half of high school graduates go to college. Of those half, only half finish. The other half drop out with all kinds of debt. And then of the half of that quarter that finish, only half of those actually get a real job that uses a college degree. A lot of them end up at, Starbucks or elsewhere, like they're just not using their degree, yet they have all of this debt. So it's a really, really horribly inefficient and unproductive and damaging system, which is what the whole essence of the article is that finally the news is starting to get out about, like, everybody likes to talk about the winners. And, the 20% of kids who do get through the whole system successfully are great winners and get great jobs and get on great career tracks. But now there's much more potential. It's much more consideration of the 80% that aren't. It's almost like, the kids say, I'm going to be an NBA star. Well, that's a good plan A, but what's a plan B, right?
Right.
So,
okay, is that somebody's dog?
Yeah, it's my dogs.
Oh,
Oh, man.
all right. Well, Scott is going to step away here. So, Tory, listen, I think we're pretty much closing down on our segment today, but I wanted to remind listeners a couple things. So, whenschoolsnotworking.com, so you can go to that website and sign up. And when you sign up, then they will be able to get more information about.
It's really it'll mainly just reminders for and there's always links. So if you don't want to sign up, you can still get the link to the live session 7 p.m. Central Time on Mondays every week. We'll be there. You can just click the link and join in. It's on Facebook Live and on Zoom Live, and we will take your questions.
Awesome. So parents, really make sure that you take folks up like this, on offers like this, because information on how to change the structure of your child's education is very hard to find, and it's very, very rare that someone like Tory or Andrew or Kath, who we interviewed last week on this show, is available for that type of conversation. So definitely take up. And then the other part is the Be Someone app.
BeSomeone.app. You can go to our landing page there and check it out. If you know a teenager, please direct them to it. That's our real target audience. We'd love for them to try it out and send us their feedback. Would be fantastic.
Very good. Scott, any other questions before we let Tory go?
No, I just I totally agree with Tory about the overemphasis on college. I was in the Houston school district when there was such pressure on pushing everyone to college and college acceptance rates and college success rates. And, we knew in schools that not only did every kid not want to go to college, college just wasn't the right fit for a bunch of kids. Eventually maybe, but I think Tory's spot on that the investment today, compared to the return on investment, parents really need to take a very careful look at that.
Yeah.
Right. One of the craziest data points that comes out of that article is Google is now offering 6-month certificates on data analytics, and it's free. And at the end of it, they'll treat it just like you have a college degree. I mean, how does a college compete with that? Right? I have a Google certificate in data analytics. Like, my career is set.
Tory, I couldn't agree more. I just remember having a conversation with an attorney in Houston, and what that attorney told me was he used very little in the law practice based upon what he learned in law school.
Right.
And so I think this credentialing, what you can do, not necessarily, the college that you've been to, is going to, become more prominent, for many factors. The main factor is colleges are just too damn expensive.
Yes, they've really priced themselves out of the market.
All right,
realistically.
so, Scott, we're going to do a conversation about colleges. I've been doing a lot of reading and having a lot of conversations with my with some friends who are still on college boards, and the turmoil that COVID is causing, because every university now is saying, how do we keep our doors open, not how do we educate kids and get them ready for the future. They're just taking it on the chin, and frankly, well deserved. So, all right, Tory, thank you so much for being on the Education Game. Love the work you're doing, and I think you know that my kids actually have been involved with the Be Someone app as well. So thank you for that as well. I end up getting so much out of these conversations because I get to go, oh, kids, take a look at this, right? So thank you for all that you've done. And
hey, Tory, this is how Matt gets all of his curriculum for his kids. He just invites people like you, and then steals all of your ideas.
He's not actually publishing this podcast. It's really it's all a front.
Well, my daughter's sitting right there, and my son's over here, and they just have to. This is required listening for them. So
live audience. That's fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tory. Keep up the great work.
It's good to see you, Tory.
Good to see you, Scott. Good to see you, Matt. Thanks so much.
All right, another fantastic interview, and really, really, really love Tory. He has, again, like I said, he has shared so many things with me and my kids that I just take, and then just, our kids, you got to do this next thing. So, all right. So
yeah, what's always impressed me about Tory, Matt, is you know how you meet those people, and they just really walk into the room and ask the question, why not? Why can't we do something? Yeah. Tory's always been that type of thinker, and
entrepreneurial really, mind.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so do we have time for the 2-minute drill?
Why don't we pause it, and then we'll do that in a moment. We're going to say goodbye to Tory off air. Okay, so Scott, gosh, again, I really appreciate Tory, and listen, viewers, we're going to send this article from the Wall Street Journal out. You need to read it, particularly the families who are thinking about college as the solution and the kind of the pathway for their kids. So Scott, any thoughts about this interview, or want to go ahead and close it out with the plays of the week? Not plays of the week.
2-minute drill.
2-minute drill. That's it. Yes.
So I thought what we would do for the 2-minute drill today is for all of our viewers and listeners, just sort of give them a map of what we're planning to do with this project called The Promise and the Plan.
Good idea.
So I'll go ahead and start. We had this great launch webinar Saturday, and we're going to make that available to pretty much anyone who wants to take a look at it.
Right.
And we had some interested families that want to take the next step, and that next step is something called a scouting report. You want to share with the audience what the scouting report is all about, Matt?
Sure. Yeah. So every parent that's going to try to build a plan, they have to kind of know where they start, right? So sometimes I think about it like this, Scott. So if you're going to make a road trip to Washington, D.C. or New York City, and you're going to drive there, you've got to have a plan. But before you develop the plan, you got to know where you are. You got to know, your automobile's repair circumstance, how much gas you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The scouting report is meant to help families start to see for the first time where their family and their child really is in learning, not in school, right? School has these evaluation metrics that oftentimes don't really make much sense anymore. Like, truthfully, grades are terrible indicators of a child's ability to learn. That is so parents who rely on grades as a measure, they're going to be disappointed oftentimes. Instead, we have 60 questions that are research-based, but help a parent understand where my child is currently in their learning and where I am as a parent am in terms of my ability to support this child's learning. Is that a good intro?
Their current reality. Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's spot on. And then after parents and families fill out the scouting report, then we're going to move forward with something that Matt and I call the game plan.
Yep.
And the game plan is intended to take a look at the next week, the next month, the next 6 months on what your learner wants to achieve in the area of some very important skills, reading, communication, including written and oral, problem solving, not just math, but science and social studies. And then one that we think is probably the most important, and that's character. Right, Matt?
That's right. Yeah, I've asked parents 100 times from Sunday, what is the most valuable part of learning, and what's the outcome you really are most after, college, career, or character? And every single parent says character. It is the thing that on which everything else is supported.
Yeah, it's sort of that old saying, what you are is more important than what you know.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're deep,
And then
Scott.
I'm deep.
You're deep.
We're right at the end. I think this 2-minute drill has turned into a
8 minutes.
3.5 minute drill. But let's don't be remiss by not sharing with the audience that if you get to the game plan part and you're kind of struggling, Matt and I are going to put together a course that parents and families can take. And we're really excited about it. And the calendar is going to be posted on the website, theeducationgame.com, as well as the course outline, as well as the game plan, as well as the scouting report, and the launch webinar, right?
Right. And so, Scott, you missed the most important part, which is we're giving the scouting report and the game plan away for free.
Because I didn't agree to that, but Matt outvoted me. Nah, I'm just kidding.
I know.
And why are we giving it away for free?
So there's a couple of reasons. One, that this is mission for us. This is actually really, really important stuff. We're trying to change how learning happens, and that we believe that's going to happen when parents start to change how they view learning in their home and learning as it relates to any institution they're partnered with. So that's number one. Second one is we believe that once parents start to look at these questions and realize these are the questions that every parent should be wrestling with, but no one has ever asked parents these questions, we think that they're going to start saying, well, gosh, these are hard questions and I need a little bit of help. And so therefore the course makes sense for those families that want to have a little bit of help in helping to develop a plan and executing on a plan for their kids.
And what's for listeners and watchers, what's the first step to take to get this thing started?
The first step is to write my name on a $100 bill and mail it to 340. Oh, that's not the first step. The first step is to complete the scouting report. And once you complete the scouting report, that then sets in motion the other parts. You'll get the game plan. We'll give you some support on the game plan. If you want to take the course, great. If you don't, you can go ahead and try to run the game plan yourself. And we are going to continue to put out webinars around how to fill out the scouting report, understanding of the game plan, and then, again, more information about the course as well. So completing the scouting report is the first move.
How do I get the scouting report?
Scouting report's going to be on our website in a few hours to a couple days.
Yeah.
And then once it's on the website, you can download it, you can start, and then send it back to us completed, and then we'll take you to the next steps. All right.
We really want to help you, like all families, with this mission.
Yeah.
And like Matt said, this is what we do.
Yep.
This is what we believe in.
Yep.
So that's a 2-minute drill, which actually turned into maybe 5 minutes.
10-minute drill, whatever.
Well, that's the show for today, and want to thank Tory Gattis for being our guest. And he was great, right, Matt?
Great guy, great work. Yep.
Hey, if you want to support the education game, there's a group of supporters called Patreon. We really appreciate all of their support, and we'd like more of you to sign on to get more details on that. You can reach out to either Matt or myself, or go to theeducationgame.com for some more information. We want to thank Bo York, who's produced the show today, and his group at Podastery Studios. But most importantly, we want to thank you for being a loyal listener and watcher of the Education Game podcast. Next week, we'll be back with more interesting stories around how you can help your children become self-directed, independent, and lifelong learners.